The air was thick with tension. Ethan Carter stood frozen, his heart pounding like a war drum. The dim, neon lights of the alien city flickered above him, casting strange shadows on the wet streets. He could barely believe the words that had just come from the creature standing in front of him. "Marry me now, or we both die." The voice was calm, but filled with urgency. The speaker, an alien named Syra, had glowing silver eyes and skin that shimmered like liquid metal. She looked human in some ways, but there was something otherworldly about her, a presence that made the air feel heavy around her. Ethan shook his head, trying to make sense of the situation. This had to be a joke, a crazy, messed-up joke. He had come to this planet, Valtrex 9, as a trader. Nothing more. He wasn't looking for love. He wasn't looking for trouble. And he definitely wasn't looking for a forced marriage with an alien. "You're insane," Ethan finally managed to say. "I don't even know you." Zyra stepped closer, her silver eyes locking onto his. "There is no time, human. They are coming. If you don't agree, we are both dead." A low, distant hum filled the air. Ethan turned his head, his pulse spiking. Something was approaching. The sound was growing louder, like the deep growl of a beast ready to pounce. "Who's coming?" Ethan asked, his throat dry. Zyra didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached for a small device on her wrist, pressing a glowing button. A transparent shield flickered around them for a second before vanishing. A protective field. Whatever was hunting them, it was serious enough for her to use advanced tech. "The enforcers," she finally said. "They will kill us both if they find us together." Ethan's stomach twisted. He had heard of the enforcers. Cold, ruthless, unstoppable. They were the highest authority in the galaxy, and once they decided someone was a threat, that person simply disappeared. He took a step back, shaking his head. "I don't even know what's going on. Why would they want to kill me?" Zyra's jaw tightened. She hesitated for a moment before saying, "Because you saw me." Ethan blinked. "What?" "You saw me in my true form, and that is forbidden." His mind raced. True form? What did that even mean? Zyra looked almost human, aside from her glowing eyes and metallic skin. But as he stared at her, something shifted. For just a split second, her entire body flickered, as if she were made of light. Ethan staggered back. What the hell had he just seen? "Now that you know what I really am," Zyra continued, her voice lower, "they will not let you live." A cold chill ran down Ethan's spine. He wasn't just in trouble. He was marked for death. "Then why would marrying you change that?" he asked. Zyra exhaled sharply, glancing at the glowing buildings around them. The hum in the air was getting louder. The enforcers were close. "Because if we are bonded," she said quickly, "by law, they cannot harm you." Ethan swallowed hard. A legal loophole. A way to cheat death. He didn't trust Zyra. He didn't trust anyone on this planet. But right now, his choices were simple. Refuse. Keep his freedom, and probably die within the next 5 minutes. Say yes. Marry a mysterious alien and figure things out later. The hum in the air turned into a deafening roar. Ethan turned his head and saw 3 black ships hovering above the city, their engines glowing a dangerous red. Zyra's voice was firm. "Decide, human. Now." Ethan's pulse hammered against his ribs. His life had always been about logic, about careful choices, about thinking before acting. But there was no time for thinking now. With a deep breath, he made his choice. "Fine," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'll do it." Zyra didn't waste a second. She grabbed his hand, pressing her palm against his. A sudden shockwave of energy rippled through Ethan's body. His vision blurred for a second, and a strange symbol appeared on his wrist, glowing faintly before fading. It was done. Zyra let go of his hand. "We have to move. Now." Ethan barely had time to process what just happened before the enforcers' ships fired their first shot. The chase had begun. Ethan barely had time to react before the energy blast struck the ground a few feet away, sending a shockwave through the alley. The force knocked him back, but Sarah caught his arm and pulled him to his feet. The air was thick with smoke and the sharp scent of burning metal. Above them, the three enforcer ships hovered like silent predators, scanning the streets with eerie red lights. "Run," Syra commanded, her voice sharp with urgency. Ethan didn't need to be told twice. He sprinted after her, his mind racing as fast as his feet. He could hear the distant sound of mechanical footsteps, enforcer droids hunting them down. These weren't just ordinary soldiers. They were programmed killers, relentless and precise. Syra led him through a maze of neon-lit streets, weaving between narrow alleys and deserted marketplaces. Ethan's lungs burned, his legs felt like lead, but he couldn't stop. If he did, he was dead. Finally, they ducked into a shadowy corridor, pressing themselves against the cold metal wall. Ethan struggled to catch his breath, his mind still spinning. "What the hell just happened?" he demanded. "What was that symbol on my wrist? What did you do to me?" Syra glanced at him, her silver eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "The bonding ritual. It's ancient. The moment our hands touched, the pact was sealed. You're no longer just a human traitor. You're part of my kind now." Ethan's stomach twisted. "Your kind? What does that mean?" She hesitated for a moment before answering. "My people are not what they seem. The form you see now, it's only a disguise, a survival mechanism. But you saw my true form. That's why they're after you." Ethan shook his head. None of this made sense. He was a traitor, not some chosen one in an intergalactic conspiracy. He had come to Valtrex 9 to make a quick deal and leave. But now, because of one chance encounter, his entire life was hanging by a thread. Above them, the enforcer ships roared past, their searchlights sweeping the streets. Syra exhaled in relief but didn't move. They weren't safe yet. Ethan gritted his teeth. "If this bond protects me, why are they still after us?" Syra's expression darkened. "Because they don't want the bond to exist. If we escape, it proves their laws can be broken. And the enforcers don't allow mistakes." The weight of her words settled heavily on Ethan's chest. This wasn't just about him. It was bigger. Whatever secrets Syra was hiding, they were powerful enough to shake the foundations of this world. A deep metallic voice echoed through the streets. "Surrender. You are surrounded." Ethan's blood ran cold. The enforcers were here. Syra grabbed his hand, her touch sending another strange pulse of energy through him. "Trust me." Before Ethan could respond, she pulled him forward, and suddenly, they were falling. The ground beneath them vanished. For a moment, Ethan was weightless. His heart leaped into his throat as they plunged into darkness, the neon city disappearing above them. He barely had time to think before they crashed onto a metal platform, sliding to a rough stop. Ethan groaned, his body aching from the impact. What the hell just happened? Syra got up first, brushing herself off. An old escape route. The enforcers don't know about it. Yet. Ethan pulled himself up, glancing around. They were in an underground tunnel, dimly lit by glowing blue strips along the walls. The air smelled of damp metal and something ancient, something untouched for years. He turned to Syra. "Where are we?" She gave him a look that sent a shiver down his spine. The only place the enforcers fear. For the first time since this nightmare started, Ethan realized something. Syra wasn't just running from the enforcers, she was leading him somewhere. And he had no idea if he would survive what came next. The tunnel stretched into the darkness, an eerie silence pressing down on them. Ethan could hear only his own breath, rapid and shallow, as he followed Syra deeper underground. The walls around them pulsed faintly with blue energy, casting shifting shadows that made it feel like the very air was alive. Ethan finally broke the silence. You still haven't told me where we're going. Zyra didn't turn. A place where they can't follow. You keep saying that, but I don't see how that's possible. He gestured at the glowing walls. The enforcers have ships, weapons, tracking systems. How can we be safe anywhere? Zyra stopped abruptly, turning to face him. Because they fear what's ahead more than they fear failure. A cold shiver ran down Ethan's spine. Before he could press her for more answers, the tunnel suddenly widened into an enormous underground cavern. His breath caught in his throat. Before them stood an ancient city, hidden beneath the surface of the planet. Towering structures of shimmering crystal and stone stretched into the darkness, their edges glowing faintly with an unnatural light. Rivers of liquid energy flowed through the streets like veins of a living thing. The air itself seemed heavier here, charged with something Ethan could feel but not understand. What is this place? He whispered. Zyra exhaled slowly, as if breathing in a memory. The ruins of the first. Ethan frowned. The first. She nodded. The first civilization. The ones who came before us. Before humans, before my kind, before the enforcers. They built this place, and then, one day, they disappeared. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, trying to process what she was saying. And the enforcers are afraid of this. Zyra's gaze hardened. They should be. She stepped forward, motioning for Ethan to follow. Hesitantly, he did. The streets were silent, but they didn't feel empty. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them. The deeper they walked, the stronger the sensation became. After a few minutes, Ethan couldn't take it anymore. Are you sure we're alone? Zyra hesitated before answering. Not exactly. Ethan stopped in his tracks. What does that mean? She turned to him, her silver eyes glowing. It means we're about to meet someone who doesn't take kindly to visitors. Before Ethan could respond, a deep ancient voice rumbled through the cavern, shaking the ground beneath them. You dare return. Ethan's blood turned to ice. From the shadows, a massive figure emerged. It was unlike anything he had ever seen, a being made of shifting stone and glowing veins of energy. Its form both solid and fluid, as if the cavern itself had come to life. Its eyes burned like dying stars, ancient and unreadable. Ethan took an involuntary step back. What the hell is that? Zyra stood firm. A guardian. The guardian's gaze locked onto Ethan. The air crackled with energy, and he felt an unbearable pressure pushing down on him, as if the very weight of history was judging his existence. You are not one of us, the guardian intoned. And yet, you wear the bond. Ethan barely understood what was happening, but one thing was clear. This guardian knew something about the mark on his wrist, and it wasn't pleased. Zyra stepped forward. We seek sanctuary. The guardian's gaze didn't waver. Sanctuary is earned, not given. A low rumble echoed through the cavern. Ethan's heart pounded. Something was waking up. The guardian slowly lifted an arm, and the ruins around them began to shift, ancient mechanisms roaring to life. Ethan realized the truth a second too late. They weren't being given a choice. They were about to be tested. The cavern trembled as the guardian raised its colossal arm, veins of molten energy pulsing beneath its shifting stone form. Ethan instinctively stepped back, his heart hammering in his chest. The walls of the underground city groaned, ancient mechanisms awakening after centuries of dormancy. Zyra, however, stood firm. She didn't even flinch. You knew this would happen, didn't you? Ethan hissed, his voice barely above a whisper. She shot him a quick glance but didn't answer. Instead, she turned her focus back to the guardian. The bond has chosen him, she declared, her voice steady. You know what that means. The guardian's burning eyes narrowed, flickering with something Ethan couldn't quite read. The bond has chosen many before him, the ancient voice rumbled. Most did not survive. The ground beneath them split apart, revealing a massive circular platform that began to rise. Ethan, and Sarah had no choice but to step onto it as the floor beneath them disappeared. Ethan swallowed hard. What is happening? Sarah exhaled. The trial. Before Ethan could demand more answers, the platform locked into place, and suddenly, the walls around them began to move. Figures emerged from the darkness. They looked human, but their bodies were covered in glowing symbols, their eyes devoid of emotion. They moved with unnatural precision, surrounding Ethan and Sarah in a perfect circle. "Prove yourself," the guardian commanded, "or be erased." Ethan barely had time to react before the first figure lunged. Instinct took over. He dodged, just barely avoiding a strike that would have taken his head off. The attacker moved like a phantom, impossibly fast, its limbs a blur. Ethan countered with a wild swing, but his fist passed right through the figure, as if it were made of smoke. Another one attacked from behind. This time, Ethan wasn't fast enough. A powerful blow struck his ribs, sending him sprawling to the ground. His vision blurred, pain exploding through his body. "Ethan!" Zyra's voice cut through the chaos. He looked up just in time to see her take down one of the figures with a precise strike to the chest, sending it collapsing into a shower of glowing embers. "You can't fight them like they're human," she said, grabbing his arm and yanking him to his feet. "They're not." Ethan gritted his teeth, pushing through the pain. "Then how do I fight them?" Zyra's gaze flicked to his wrist. "Use the bond." His mark. The strange symbol on his wrist burned, glowing brighter than ever. Ethan barely had time to process what was happening before another figure lunged at him. This time, he didn't dodge. He reached out. The moment his hand connected with the attacker's chest, a pulse of energy surged from his mark, sending the figure flying backward. It hit the ground and dissolved into light. Ethan gasped. What the hell was that? Zyra allowed herself the smallest of smiles. "You're starting to understand." The remaining figures hesitated, their empty eyes flickering. The guardian watched, unmoving. Ethan's fingers clenched into a fist. The energy still buzzed beneath his skin, waiting to be unleashed. For the first time since this nightmare had begun, he wasn't just running. He was fighting back, and he was winning. But deep down, he knew this was only the beginning. The moment Ethan struck down the last figure, the cavern fell into a deathly silence. The embers of his fallen opponents flickered in the air before vanishing into nothingness. His breath was ragged, his muscles burning with exhaustion, but the energy coursing through his body made him feel different, stronger. The guardian remained motionless, its glowing gaze locked onto Ethan. The ancient being tilted its head slightly, as if evaluating him. "Interesting," the deep voice rumbled. "You did not perish." Ethan wiped sweat from his brow, swallowing the dry lump in his throat. "Thanks for the vote of confidence." Zyra stepped forward, her stance rigid. "He passed the trial. Let us through." The guardian's eyes flared brighter, and for a moment, Ethan thought it would refuse. Then the massive being lifted its arm and pointed toward the far side of the cavern. The wall behind it began to dissolve. A new passage revealed itself, one lined with glowing symbols similar to the one on Ethan's wrist. Unlike the rough stone around them, the entrance shimmered like a portal to another world. Ethan hesitated. What's on the other side? Zyra's silver eyes gleamed. The truth. Ethan exhaled sharply. Of course it is. With no other choice, they stepped forward. The moment they crossed the threshold, the sensation of reality itself seemed to warp. Ethan's stomach lurched as he felt a strange pull, like he was being stretched and compressed at the same time. Then, just as suddenly, it was over. They were standing in what looked like an ancient chamber, vast and circular, lined with towering monoliths covered in shifting symbols. The air crackled with energy, humming with a power Ethan could feel in his bones. And in the center of the room was a throne, not just any throne, but one that looked grown rather than built, its material something between stone and crystal, pulsing with the same eerie glow as the markings on his wrist. Zyra's expression turned unreadable. "This is it," she whispered. "The seat of the first." Ethan frowned. "And what exactly does that mean?" Zyra turned to him slowly, her gaze piercing. "It means," she said, "that this is where your fate will be decided." Before Ethan could even process her words, the air in the chamber shifted. A deep, resonant hum filled the space, and then, without warning, the throne spoke. "You are not the first to stand before me." Ethan stumbled back, his pulse spiking. The voice was not mechanical, not human, but something in between, layered, ancient, filled with knowledge beyond anything he could comprehend. Zyra bowed her head slightly. "He bears the bond." "The bond does not decide worth," the throne's voice replied. "Only actions do." Ethan clenched his fists. "Then tell me what the hell I'm supposed to do. I never asked for any of this." The chamber trembled at his outburst, but the voice remained steady. "That is why you were chosen." The words sent a cold shiver down his spine. Before he could ask what they meant, the ground beneath him split apart. A deep abyss opened at the center of the chamber, revealing a glowing void beneath them. A vortex of swirling energy formed, its light shifting between colors Ethan had never seen before. Zyra's face darkened. "It's beginning." Ethan barely had time to react before the throne spoke again, its voice final, absolute. "Step forward, bearer of the bond, or be erased from existence." Ethan's pulse pounded in his ears as he stared at the abyss beneath him. The swirling vortex of energy didn't just look dangerous, it felt alive. The air around it crackled with raw power, distorting reality itself. "Step forward, bearer of the bond," the throne's voice commanded again, "or be erased from existence." Ethan's breath hitched. This was it, the moment everything had been leading up to. He turned to Zyra, desperate for answers. "What happens if I step in there?" Zyra's expression was grim. One of two things. She hesitated, then finally admitted, "Either you'll claim your destiny, or you'll be consumed." Ethan swallowed hard. "Great, so it's a 50-50 death trap." "No." Zyra's silver eyes locked onto his. "The unworthy never return." Ethan exhaled, dragging a hand down his face. He wanted to run, to fight this, but deep inside, he knew there was no turning back. He stepped forward. The moment his foot left solid ground, the vortex pulled him in. A violent force yanked him downward, spinning him into nothingness. Colors exploded around him, voices whispering in a language he didn't understand. It was like falling through time itself. Then, suddenly, everything stopped. Ethan opened his eyes. He was somewhere else. The chamber, the throne, Zyra, all gone. Instead, he stood in a vast, endless void, stars swirling in the darkness around him. But this wasn't space. No, it was something deeper, older. And then he saw it. A towering, shadowed figure, its form shifting like liquid darkness, standing before him. Its eyes burned like twin suns, radiating an energy Ethan had never felt before. "You are not ready." The voice wasn't spoken. It echoed inside his mind. Ethan staggered back. "Who? What are you?" The entity didn't move. "I am the first." The first. The one the throne had spoken of. Ethan's chest tightened. "Then tell me what this bond means. Why was I chosen?" The first's eyes flickered, unreadable. "Because you were never meant to be." Ethan's blood ran cold. "What does that mean?" The first finally moved, stepping closer. The darkness around it twisted, warping reality itself. "You are an anomaly. A mistake in the cycle. Your existence is an error." Ethan's stomach turned. "An error?" The first nodded. "The bond was never meant to choose you, and yet, it did." Ethan clenched his fists. "Then why am I here?" For the first time, something like curiosity flickered in the first burning eyes. "That is what I must decide." The stars around them began to spin faster and faster until the void itself trembled. Ethan felt himself being pulled apart, his very essence being examined, tested. Memories flooded his mind, his past, his fears, his choices. He saw himself as a child, lost and alone. He saw every moment of weakness, every regret, every time he had run away instead of fighting. But he also saw something else. The moments where he had stood his ground, where he had refused to break, where, despite everything, he had kept going. The first watched, judging, deciding. Then, finally, it spoke. "You are not like the others." Ethan gasped for air, his body trembling. "Does that mean I pass?" A long silence. Then, "No." Ethan's heart dropped. Then what? The first leaned forward, its presence suffocating. "It means you must choose." The void shattered. Ethan was falling again. But this time, he wasn't alone. Ethan hit the ground with a force that rattled his bones. Cold, unyielding. The impact sent shockwaves through his body. But when he looked up, he realized he wasn't where he had been before. This place was different. The sky was wrong, twisting, shifting, a deep violet hue with streaks of silver lightning. The air buzzed with an eerie hum, vibrating through his very cells. It was as if the universe itself was breathing. And then, he saw her. Zaira stood a few feet away, her silver eyes glowing faintly in the unnatural twilight. But there was something off about her. Something changed. "Ethan." Her voice was softer than before, almost hesitant. Ethan pushed himself to his feet, ignoring the burning pain in his muscles. "Where are we?" Zaira hesitated. Then she said something that made his blood run cold. "Nowhere." His breath hitched. "What?" She took a step closer, and for the first time, Ethan noticed the flickering shadows curling around her like living tendrils. "This is the space between." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "The place where the unchosen go." Ethan's mind reeled. "Unchosen? You mean the ones who failed?" A weight settled in his chest. The first had said he was an anomaly, a mistake. Had he been rejected? Had he already lost? No, that wasn't possible. Ethan clenched his fists. "I didn't fail. I'm still here." Zaira's expression darkened. "That's what they all say." And then, the whispers began. Low at first, almost gentle. Then growing, swelling into a chaotic storm of voices, clawing at his mind. "You don't belong. You were never meant to be. Give up. Let go." Ethan staggered back, pressing his hands to his head. "No, this isn't real. This is just another test." Zaira tilted her head. "Is it?" And then she changed. Her form twisted, morphing into something else, something monstrous. Her limbs elongated, her face stretched into a jagged, unnatural grin, her silver eyes now pits of endless black. The shadows wrapped around her, pulling her apart and remaking her into something unrecognizable. "You are nothing." The voices thundered. "You never were." The ground beneath him cracked, opening into an abyss of pure darkness, a void that would swallow him whole. He was being erased. Ethan's pulse pounded in his ears. No, he wouldn't let this happen. He wouldn't let them decide his fate. With a roar, he forced himself forward, toward the abyss. Zaira. ***, or what had become of her. *** lunged, but Ethan didn't stop. He dove headfirst into the darkness, letting it consume him. And then, everything exploded. Light, heat, power, rushing through him. Memories, knowledge, things he had never known before. They weren't being erased. They were being rewritten. And when the void finally spat him out, he wasn't the same. He knew who he was. He knew why he had been chosen. And he knew exactly what he had to do. Because the real test had only just begun.